Hello and welcome to Daily Prelims Practice, where we take up the questions from the Hindu and the Indian Express and curate them as per the demands of Civil Services Prelims examination. The topics for the discussion are listed on your screen. As you all know that the prelims is now around the corner. It is the best time to test yourself, and we at Raus IAS have planned and organized a pre-parikshan test dated on 28th and 29th of Jan. This test is available both in online as well as the offline mode, and for which you have to register yourself first, and the registration link has been provided in the YouTube description section. The discussion for the same test will follow on 30th Jan. The benefits for appearing in this test is that you will be able to analyze the areas where you are lacking as well as able to revise in a timely manner. So do appear for the test which is scheduled on 28 and 29.
Moving on to the first article of the day that has featured in the Hindu, basically talks about National Export Cooperative Society. The article mentions that the nano fertilizers that are produced by IFCO and dairy products from the Amul will be among the first few products that are expected to be exported by the first ever National Export Cooperative Society. In this context, we need to understand the framework of cooperative society in India, as UPSC has previously, under the polity section, asked questions related to various organizations and bodies under its ambit, and also with regard to the provisions of fundamental right and directive principles of state policy related to them. And such a question was seen in the year 2017, where UPSC asked about the 42nd Amendment to the Indian Constitution and the DPSP related to it. Moving on to the practice question, it says, consider the following statement regarding cooperative society. The first statement here is, the right to form cooperative society is a fundamental right. Now this statement is correct. The 97th Constitutional Amendment Act gave constitutional status and protection to the cooperative society. It made the following changes. It made right to form cooperative society a fundamental right under Article 19. Further, it also included a new directive principle of state policy which called for promotion of cooperative society under Article 43B. Moving on to the second statement, it says it is a subject under the concurrent list of the 7th schedule. Now this statement is incorrect. The cooperative society is a subject which is enumerated as entry 32 of the state list of the 7th schedule of Constitution, and state legislatures have accordingly enacted legislations on the cooperative society. Moving on to the third statement, it says it added Part 9A to the Constitution through the 97th Constitutional Amendment Act. Now this statement is again incorrect, as Part 9A deals with the institutions of Panchayati Raj, that is the Panchayati Raj institutions, and not that related to cooperative society. It is Part 9B that deals with the cooperative society, and this was also included by 97th Constitutional Amendment Act. Moving on with the question, it says which of the statement given above is or are correct, and as only statement 1 is correct, the correct answer for the given question is option A. Further, the correct answer for the previous year question is option B. Moving on to the next article of the day that has featured in the Hindu, basically talks about the POCSO Act, or the Protection of Children from Sexual Offences Act 2012. Now the article mentions that 10 years have passed since the POCSO Act was enacted as a consequence to India's ratification of the UN Convention on the Rights of Child in 1992. And the Act came into effect in 2012, with the aim of the Act being a special law to address offences of sexual exploitation and sexual abuse of children, which were either not specifically defined or inadequately penalized. Now UPSC in the previous year has also asked questions related to various terminologies that were in use under the polity section, and such a question was also seen in the year 2021, where UPSC asked about the judicial custody. So any such act becomes important for us with perspective from prelims. The practice question here says, consider the following statement with respect to the Protection of Children from Sexual Offenders Act, that is the POCSO Act 2012. The first statement here is, the Act provides for gender neutral provisions. Now this statement is correct, as a significant feature of the POCSO Act is its gender neutral nature. Moving on to the second statement, it says, The Act was amended in the year 2019, which lowered the age of consent from 18 years to 16 years. Now, this statement is incorrect, as it was in 2012 that the POCSO Act has raised the age of consent from 16 to 18 years, which had been 16 since 1940, as the law now criminalizes all the sexual activities for those under the age of 18 years, even if the consent was factually present between the two minors. Meaning thereby, if a girl is 16-year-old, she is considered as a child under the POCSO Act, and hence her consent does not matter, and any sexual intercourse is treated as rape. Moving on to the third statement, it says the complaint has to be made within 3 years of the occurrence of the crime. Now, this statement is again incorrect, as there may be trauma that the child sex abuse victims endure, which can prevent them from voicing their complaints immediately. And recognizing this, in 2018, the Union Ministry of Law and Justice clarified that there is no time or age bar for reporting sexual offences under the Act. Thus, a victim can report an offence at any point of time, even a number of years after the abuse has been committed. Moving on to the next statement, it says the National Commission for Protection of Child Rights monitors and implements the POCSO Act. Now, this statement is correct. The National Commission for Protection of Child Rights performs the powers and functions assigned to it, and there are various services that this body provides. It addresses all the violation and deprivation of child rights under the Commission for Protection of Child Rights Act. It also inquires into complaints relating to the violations and deprivation of children's rights to education under the Right to Education Act. At the same time, it also monitors the implementation of POCSO Act under its working. The question further says, which of the following statement given above is or are correct? And as only statement 1 and 4 here are correct, the correct code for the given question will be option D. Further, the correct code for the previous year question is option B. Moving on to the next article of the day that has featured in the Hindu, basically talks about the freedom of speech as under Article 19. Now, the Supreme Court has ruled that all the citizens have the right to free speech and expression under Article 19(1)(a) of the Constitution. An expression of views by a candidate does not disentitle him to hold a constitutional office so long as the person proposed for the judgeship is a person of competence, merit and integrity. And the Supreme Court refused to drop the name of Advocate R. John Satyan for the Madras High Court merely because government received the report portraying his articles as a political betrayal. Now, UPSC has previously also asked questions related to various fundamental rights and the issues evolving from it, and such a question was also seen in the year 2018 where UPSC asked about right to privacy. A practice question in this regard related to Article 19 can be framed. The practice question here says, consider the following statement regarding Article 19. The first statement here is, the rights guaranteed under Article 19 are protected against the state only. Now, this statement is correct, as the 6 rights that are guaranteed under Article 19 are protected against only state action and not private individuals. Further, the rights are available only to the citizens and to the shareholders of a company, but not to foreigners or legal persons like companies or corporations. Moving on to the next statement, it says the right to obtain recognition of association is also promised under it, that is Article 19. Now, this statement is incorrect, as though the citizens have the complete liberty to form association or union for pursuing their lawful objectives and purposes. However, the right to obtain recognition of association is not a fundamental right. Moving on to the third statement, it says it provides for freedom of movement both within and outside the country. Now, this statement is again incorrect. The freedom of movement has 2 dimensions, that is internal freedom of movement and external freedom of movement. Internal meaning right to move inside the country, and external here meaning right to move out of the country and right to come back to the country. Article 19 protects only the first dimension, that is the internal movement. The second dimension, that is the external movement, is dealt by Article 21 and not Article 19. The question further says which of the following statement is or are correct, and as only statement 1 is correct, the correct code for the given question will be option D. Further, the correct code for the previous year question is option C. Moving on to the next article of the day that has featured on page 15 of the Indian Express, basically talks about the RBI report on inflation. And under this question, we'll try to understand topic of inflation and its measurement in India, as UPSC has previously also asked questions related to inflation under the economic section, and we can very well expect a question on the similar lines, as a question related to them was seen in year 2020. The practice question in this regard says, with reference to retail and wholesale inflation in India, consider the following statement. The first statement here is, all wholesale inflation measures are calculated at the producer's level. Now, wholesale inflation is nothing but the WPI, and retail inflation here is nothing but the consumer price index, that is CPI. Now, first statement here is correct, as the wholesale inflation or the WPI tracks inflation at producer's level and is calculated by the Office of Economic Advisor under the Ministry of Commerce and Industry. Moving on to the second statement, it says retail inflation includes services in the Indian economy. Now this statement is correct, as the retail inflation or the consumer price index includes both goods and services in the economy. And RBI has been using the CPI for the inflation targeting and related tools. Moving on to the third statement, it says all inflation indices in India are compiled by the Office of Economic Advisor. Now this statement is incorrect. We have seen that the Office of Economic Advisor under the Ministry of Commerce and Industry comes out with the wholesale price index, whereas the consumer price index, on the other hand, is published by the National Statistical Organization or the NSO under Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation. The question further says which of the statement given above are correct, and as only statement 1 and 2 are correct, the correct code for the given question will be option A. Further, the correct code for the previous year question is also option A. Moving on to the next article that has featured in the Indian Express, basically talks about the FAME scheme, as the FAME probe is on, under which 6 more EV makers are under the scanner. We'll try to take a question on the FAME 1 and FAME 2 scheme, as UPSC has previously also asked questions related to various government schemes that were in use in that year, and such a question was seen in the year 2016 when UPSC asked about the Uday scheme. The practice question in this regard says, with respect to faster adoption and manufacturing of electric and hybrid vehicles, that is the FAME scheme, consider the following statement. The first statement here is, it is a part of National Electric Mobility Mission 2020. Now, this statement is correct, as the first phase of the FAME India scheme started in 2015 and was launched under the part of National Electric Mobility Mission of 2020, as the aim of the National Electric Mobility Mission was to achieve national fuel security by promoting hybrid and electric vehicles in the country. Moving on to the second statement, it says it was launched under Ministry of New and Renewable Energy. Now this statement is incorrect. It was launched by the Ministry of Heavy Industry and Public Enterprises, wherein manufacturers and infrastructure providers of electric vehicle receive this incentive in the form of subsidies. Moving on to the third statement, it says the phase 1 of the FAME schemes aims to cover highways as well as establish charging station on both the sides of the road with a gap of 50 km between the two consecutive stations. Now this statement is again incorrect, as it was under phase 2 of the scheme that the government aims to cover highways as well as establish charging stations on both the sides of the road with a gap of 25 km and not 50 km between the two consecutive stations. The question further says which of the statement given above is or are correct, and as only statement 1 is correct, the correct code for the given question will be option A. Further, the correct code for the previous year question is option D. Moving on to the last topic of the day that is featured in the Indian Express, basically talks about the issue of hybrid immunity. The recent study in the journal, The Lancet. Moving on to the last topic of the day that is featured in the Indian Express, basically a reinfection wanes within a few months. And this study was based on a meta-analysis of other studies on protection of effectiveness against the SARS-CoV-2. Now UPSC under the science section has previously also asked questions related to various diseases and the responses to them, and such a question was seen in the year 2021 when UPSC asked about the recombinant vector vaccines. A practice question in this regard can be made. The practice question here says, which of the following is the best description of the term hybrid immunity? The first statement here is immunity provided by two primary vaccination. Now this explanation is incorrect. The second statement here is immunity provided by combination of infection and vaccination. Now this statement is correct. Hybrid immunity, as discussed, is the immunity which is provided by a combination of infection and vaccination. And this provides better chances of protection against the subsequent COVID-19 than either vaccination or infection alone, as a combination of infection and vaccination provides for higher antibody levels, less frequent and less severe infection. So statement B here is correct. Further, the answer for the previous year question is option C.